It's June 2025 and I'm in a church that's bigger than more than a third of England's cathedrals, and yet it's never been promoted to the big league. Eight miles northwest of the city of Kingston upon Hull, Beverley is a market town and the county town of the East Riding of Yorkshire, including the period between 1974 and 1996 when it was unglamorously called Humberside. The town was founded in the 7th century by the then Bishop of York, John of Beverley, who established a church in the area originally under the Anglian Kingdom of Northumbria. The town thrived for a number of years, but the archaeological evidence suggests that around the 850s, the now developed monastery was abandoned, likely because of the Norse invasions that had taken place, with Beverley only about 25 miles from the Viking capital at Jorvik, modern-day York. However, within 100 years, the population began to increase again, with a rise in people coming to venerate John of Beverley. This number only increased after John was made a saint in 1037. The town became a hotspot for pilgrimage, becoming one of the top 3 pilgrimage sites in England, alongside Walsingham in Norfolk and Canterbury in Kent. By the time of the Battle of Brunaba in 937, the church in town was back under English control, as King Aethelstan prayed in the church before heading into battle, taking the banner of St John with him. The battle pitted Aethelstan and his English army against the combined forces of Olaf Guthferthson, King of Dublin, Constantine II, King of Scotland, and Owen, King of Strathclyde. The aim was to destroy Aethelstan and his now unified and increasingly important Kingdom of England. Aethelstan's crushing defeat of the combined armies at Brunaba effectively created the modern country of England and has been described as one of the most significant battles in the long history not just of England, but of the whole British Isles. The battle has also been called the greatest single battle in Anglo-Saxon history, before Hastings. Following his victory, and the perceived assistance of the banner of John, the town of Beverley only needed to send the banner and a single banner bearer into battle for a couple of centuries going forward, whilst other towns were forced to contribute up to 100 archers or soldiers. Following that same battle at Hastings, much of the north of England rejected Norman rule and sought to reinstate Viking rule. And in their genocidal response for harrying of the north, the Normans obliterated many towns across Yorkshire. They, however, spared Beverley because of the town's saintly history. Once they'd finally slaughtered their way to control of the whole of England, the Normans established a trading industry in the town, with it becoming an important centre for the wool trade. With the money from wool and pilgrims, Beverley grew to become the 10th largest town and one of the wealthiest in England by 1377. However, as so often in the history of England, the over-bloated shadow of Henry VIII falls heavy on the town, as his dissolution of the monasteries led to a dramatic decline in pilgrimage across the country. At one point, the minster itself was threatened with demolition by its new owners, who'd bought it off Henry to sell the stone and led off for profit. However, the local population, led by wealthy merchant Richard Grey, managed to save the building. A couple of months prior to the start of the English Civil War, the people of Hull refused to open the gates of the town to Charles I, after which the king spent 3 weeks as a guest in Beverley, where he was greeted with a ringing of St Mary's church bells. So it's no surprise that when the Civil War broke out, the town was royalist. During the Georgian period, the town became the primary market town of the area, seeing off competition from Pocklington, Howden and Market Weighton, meaning the town had the money to start replacing many of the old timber buildings with new ones in the Georgian style. The town was only lightly touched by the Industrial Revolution, which helped propel Hull into being a much larger city, with the town mostly still focused on agriculture. The Second World War saw Hull suffer the second highest level of bombing in the country behind London, but Beverley only saw one bomb fall, and that was likely an accident. Post-war researchers unearthed documents and maps that show the Minster was a key navigational aid for Luftwaffe pilots. Drop the bombs over Hull, turn, line up with the roof over the Minster, and you're on a direct line back east to occupied Europe. Consequently, the whole town was on the strict no-bomb list. Whilst the town has never regained the heights it reached with pilgrimages and wool, in 2007 it was named as the best place to live in the United Kingdom in an affordable, affluent study by the Royal Bank of Scotland. That is, of course, just a year before RBS, under the control of Fred Goodwin, imploded and had to be bailed out to the tune of £42 billion by the UK government. St Mary's Church is a large-sized parish church in the north of the town centre. In any other town in England, this would be an impressive structure, but the looming bulk of Beverley Minster, the church feels small in comparison. Always in the shadow of the Minster, the church was established in the first half of the 12th century as a daughter church of Beverley Minster to serve the town's trading community. The church underwent a number of expansions and extensions over the following centuries, although works appear to have paused for a number of years in the mid-14th century, in common with many other cases throughout the country, as the Black Death ravaged England. with building works not commencing again until the start of the 15th century. Starting in the late 15th century and carrying on into the 16th century, a series of fine wooden ceilings were installed, and these are now perhaps what the building is most famous for. The most recognised is the chancel ceiling, which has depictions of 40 English kings, from the mythical Brutus through to Henry VI. The work was completely repainted in 1863 and had a portrait of George VI added in 1939. During evensong on the 29th of April 1520, the central tower of the church collapsed, taking much of the eastern end of the nave with it. Rebuilding work began immediately after the collapse, with the south arcade bearing an inscribed date of 1524 at both east and west ends. Major renovation works of the building were undertaken between 1829 and 30. Further works were started in 1844 under the control of Augustus Pugin, with the work passing on to his son Edward. Other architects who have worked for the church include George Gilbert Scott. New renovation works have been taking place since 2020, with the weathered stone carvings being replaced with more modern interpretations, including figures based on the characters from C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. There's also a focus on celebrating women in the restoration of the stonework, which is almost always dominated by male faces. Faces to be added include Hull-born pilot and engineer Amy Johnson and Beverley-educated aeronautical engineer Hilda Lyon. Her research into aerodynamics led to the creation of the lion shape, which has formed the streamlined form for almost all US submarines built since the 1950s. Joining them will be women's rights advocate, writer and philosopher Mary Wollstonecraft, Mary Seacole, famous for her work during the Crimean War that has previously been somewhat overshadowed by another famous nurse, Nobel laureate, physicist, chemist and pioneer of research on radioactivity Marie Curie, one of the people most responsible for the discovery of DNA, Rosalind Franklin, mathematician and computer pioneer Ada Lovelace, the first Brit to go into space Helen Sharman, and Queen Elizabeth II. But the main religious building in town is the Minster, or to give it its full name, the parish church of St John and St Martin. The then Bishop of York, John, founded a monastery in Beverley around 700, and following his retirement from the position of Bishop of York in 717, he moved into the monastery for the final 7 or so years of his life. Following his death, he was entombed in a vault that still exists beneath the nave of the church. Archaeological excavations carried out between 1979 and 1982 confirmed that a major church had stood on the site of the present Minster for about 150 years, from 700 to 850, which has led to speculation that the first church was destroyed during the sacking of a monastery by Vikings. The monastery was refounded, probably around the time of Athelstan, and by the time John was canonised in 1037, the site had become a major pilgrimage centre. A 12th century charter shows the substantial rebuilding work on the church took place following John's canonisation, with a high stone tower erected and a painted and gilded ceiling installed. A fire in 1188 caused serious damage across Beverley, with the church so badly damaged that a complete rebuild was required, leading to the tearing down of what remained of the church at the time. During the building works, a new lantern tower over the crossing was built, designed to illuminate the shrine of St John, but it collapsed during construction around 1219, requiring a partial rebuilding of the church. The new church is one of the first examples of a new Gothic style in England, and would have been significantly bigger, more spacious and lighter than the older church it replaced. Works on the church slowed down and likely stopped altogether during the years of the Black Death, but by 1400 the nave was complete and work was underway on the 2 towers of the west end of the building. The towers were considered so well executed that a couple of hundred years later Nicholas Hawksmoor copied the design for the West Towers at Westminster Abbey. Consequently, many film and TV shows that want external shots of Westminster Abbey find it cheaper and easier to have Beverley Minster stand in. Nicholas Hawksmoor had been up in Beverley in an attempt to save the church from imminent collapse, in part caused by the excess weight of that troublesome lantern tower that was forcing the north and south transept walls out, and in part by the general lack of investment in the church following the Reformation. With the dissolution of the monasteries by Henry VIII, the church had lost a lot of its importance, especially it was overlooked for converting into cathedral, turning it into a very oversized regular parish church. By the beginning of the 18th century, the church was in a state of decay, which is why between 1717 and 1731, Nicholas Hawksmoor, perhaps the most famous pupil of Sir Christopher Wren, helped to rebuild the church, which included taking down the lantern tower and replacing much of the heavy stone of the north transept with carved wood to help keep the building together. During the summer months, twice a day, you can join in on a tour that takes you up into the roof space of the Minster to get some unique views of the church. This includes taking in the views from the large round windows in the south and north transepts, and watching as the fake ceiling boss above the organ is winched up to create the space where materials can be lifted up into the roof space from the church floor. Or in emergencies, people can be evacuated from the roof back down to the church floor in a cradle. Though looking through the hole of the 80-foot drop to the floor below, I think I'd opt for the 113 steps, even if I had to crawl down. Good view of the organ, though. Prior to the fitting of the electric winch, the treadmill had been used as a way of raising items up into the space. There's a quick detour into the space above the nave looking towards the west, with the wall visible only about halfway down the church. Before a final visit to the space above the north transept, where most of the repair work was carried out by Hawksmoor to save the church, with a final giant window to look out of. One of the best views of the Minster, and to be able to see where we climbed up to, is to be had from the viewing tower of the Champney Treasure House, the town's combined museum, archive, art gallery and library, located just behind the Victorian County Hall in a building that combines the historic public library and gallery buildings with a modern extension. There are also good views of the County Hall buildings and the Tower of St Mary's to be had from up here as well. The museum houses a small collection on the history of the East Riding of Yorkshire, including archaeological and geological finds, as well as more recent history. Across the link bridge from the new to the historic building and you reach the art gallery, though at the time of visiting, much of it was closed for rehanging. 12 miles northeast of Beverley and you hit the East Riding coast of the seaside town of Hornsey. Hornsey as a settlement dates back to at least the early medieval period and possibly earlier, with the discovery of what were believed to be Iron Age or Roman crop marks and field systems. During the medieval period, Hornsey was a fishing town and port, though this had ended by the 16th century. The town expanded with the arrival of the Hull and Hornsey Railway in 1864, turning into a Victorian seaside resort town. The growth of the town as a seaside resort can be seen for population more than quadrupling from 533 in 1801 to 2,381 a century later. As with many seaside resorts in Britain, the post-war boom in foreign travel didn't help the town, nor did the closure of its railway line in 1965. On a warm, sunny summer Saturday, the town is still a popular local beach resort, and it's also the start of the 207-mile Trans-Pennine Trail, a long-distance path that runs between the identical trail markers in Hornsey on the north coast and Southport on the Irish sea coast. The decline of tourism is not the biggest of the town's problems, though. When those fields were being ploughed by Iron Age farmers, they're about 3 miles inland. In around 2,000 years, the relentless erosion of the coast by the sea has cut all that land away, destroyed the fishing port by the 16th century, and Hornsey is on borrowed time as the North Sea slowly consumes the coast, with, in locations, some of the caravan parks and houses being one bad winter storm away from an inevitable slide into the sea. The loss of more cliffs, made up of soft soil that does little to prevent its washing away, has already led to the start of a managed retreat as the coastline creeps west with every lap of wave and gust of breeze. 12 miles to the northwest of Hornsey and you reach the small village of Burton Agnes. It's 2 manor houses and church. The village was large enough to have a railway station on the Hull to Scarborough, Yorkshire coastline when it opened in 1846, but the station was closed in January 1970. At the 2001 census, the village had a population of 496. A decade later, in the 2011 census, that had grown by 1 to 497. The village is home to Burton Agnes Hall and Garden, which includes the original Norman Manor House, the Elizabethan replacement Manor House, and the Church of St Martin. The original Norman Manor House was built between 1170 and 1180 by Roger de Stoutville, with both the house and the village named after his daughter. I'm assuming just the Agnes part. The village and house passed into the hands of the Somerville family by marriage in 1274, and by the same route to the Griffith family around 1323. By 1654, the estate passed from Sir Henry Griffith to his nephew Sir Francis Boyton, with the estate still in the ownership of the Boyton family to today. Parts of the original Norman-era manor house are still standing to today, opposite the more recent, i.e. only just over 400 years old rather than nearly 1,000 years old, Elizabethan manor house. The Norman building is just one of a handful of surviving examples of a Norman manor house, with a well-preserved undercroft, much of it built out of local chalk. Sometime in the 18th century, the Norman-era building was encased in modern, to the time, brickwork to help protect it and convert it for use as a laundry, which is why from the outside it looks more modern than its interior, with stone-framed sash windows being much more Georgian than Norman. Since passing into the care of Now English Heritage in 1948, restoration work has been undertaken to return it to how it would have looked when it was the manor house. The interior of the hall may also be influenced by a restoration carried out sometime in the 15th century by Sir Walter Griffith, which included a new roof. On the upper floor is a single grand hall, off of which there may have been private living spaces, that these have been lost to time. Having recently been appointed to the Council of the North, Sir Henry Griffith had a new Elizabethan-style manor house built between 1601 and 1610 to reflect his growing importance. Much of the house is open to look around, including the grand entrance hall, and the red drawing room and dining room on the ground floor. On the first floor there's the Queen's bedroom, and the neighbouring King's bedroom that leads through into the white drawing room. Most of the upper floor is dominated by the long gallery, which stretches the full width of the house. 2 rooms sit in the towers created by the bay windows, to the left the library and to the right the reading room. Outside the house, the grounds and gardens of the hall are also open to the public to look around, including the extensive walled garden. Which includes a maze and many hidden smaller courtyard gardens complete with chess sets hidden behind the glass houses. Beverley Station sits on the Yorkshire coastline between Hull and Scarborough and generally has hourly trains from York taking about an hour, Doncaster taking 70 minutes and just over 90 minutes from Sheffield. All services operate via Hull, which is about 15 minutes by train every 30 minutes. Hull trains operate 2 trains in the early morning Monday to Friday, 1 on a Saturday morning and 1 lunchtime on a Sunday from Beverley to King's Cross via Hull, taking around 3 hours. Return services leave London mid-afternoon Monday to Friday and early evening every day of the week. Outside of these times, Hull Trains provides up to 7 trains a day between Hull and London King's Cross. Alternatively, there are connections to the East Coast Main Line and frequent services to London, Newcastle and Manchester via York or Doncaster.